What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Algebra 1 with Mr. Peters. In today's video, we're talking about completing the square. So I'm going to show you guys how to identify perfect square trinomials. Then I'm going to talk to you guys about how to solve by completing the square. And in the last part of this video, we're going to talk about completing the square when the leading term, that x squared, is greater than 1. Let's get started for today. When we start this topic off, guys, we have to understand what exactly is a perfect square trinomial. So, a perfect square trinomial is when we take the same binomial and multiply it by itself. So, if we multiplied x minus 2 times x minus 2, the perfect square trinomial would be this: x squared minus 4x plus 4, right? After we have the negative 2x plus negative 2x, those middle terms, we will simplify and get this. So this is the example of a perfect square trinomial. Now, the way that we identify it is understanding the relationship between B and C. So you've probably seen this equation before. And if we want to figure out if it's a perfect square trinomial, we're going to do this. We're going to take B, divide it by 2, and then square it. So when we look at this first example, half of 10 is 5, right? Negative 5. When you square negative 5, our answer is going to be 25. So this would be a perfect square trinomial. And the binomial is going to be is whatever your answer is after you divide b by 2. So in this one, we have 5, right? So the perfect square trinomial will be x minus 5 squared. If we write this out and multiply by FOILing, right, we would get this as an answer. Now we go to problem number 2. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So yes, this is a perfect square trinomial. What is the binomial that will get us this? Well, half of 6, like I said, is 3. So if we take x, oh, I'm sorry, not minus, this is plus, x plus 3, and we square this, it will give us that trinomial there. Now, in our third example, we do the same thing. Half of negative 8 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. This is a perfect square trinomial. It would be x minus 4 squared, and that will give us that trinomial. Now, in our last example, we know that this is not a perfect square trinomial. Why? Because half of 8 is 4, and when you square 4, it's going to be 16. So there's no way that we could take x minus 4 and square it to get this trinomial. Now that we understand what is a perfect square trinomial, let's go into how to solve. In this part of the video, guys, we're now practicing on how to solve and complete the square. So in the first example, let's determine if this is actually a problem where we could do this. So off rip, right? In our first example, half of 12 is going to be 6, right? So we know negative 6 squared is going to give me what? It's going to give me 36. So this is a perfect square trinomial. We can solve, I'm sorry, by completing the square. So I write my factor out, right? We have x minus 6 is squared is equal to 25. So in this problem, they gave us a perfect square trinomial and they told us what this is equal to. So now we have to solve. So after we determine that first step, perfect square trinomial, right? We're going to try to now get rid of the exponent. And to get rid of the exponent, we need to take its root. So once we do this step, exponent is gone. We have x minus 6 is equal to, and remember, we're going to get two answers, right? So plus or minus the square root of 25, which is 5. Now when I simplify, we have two equations. X minus 6 is equal to positive 5, or x minus 6 is equal to negative 5. Now once I solve, I know x is equal to either 11, right? Or x is equal to 1. So this is the first example when they give you a perfect square trinomial, and then you just have to simplify, get rid of the exponent and solve. Now, typically in these problems, it's not going to be like that. So in this first scenario, right, they're going to give it to us, but they're giving it to us out of order, meaning I'm going to have to flip 10x and 12 around, right? So we can figure out what is the perfect square trinomial. So after I subtract 12, I have x squared is equal to 10x minus 12. Now I'm going to subtract 10, bring it over to the other side. So I have x squared minus 10x is equal to negative 12. Now, I really need you guys to make sure you're paying attention to this part because this is typically what we see with completing the square. We're going to have it in this version, right? And we are not going to have that C term, that last term that completes the square. So basically, we're not going to have this number. We have to figure it out. So this is how we do it. We take half of 10, right? That's 5. 5 squared is going to give me 25. So as a result, now, right, we're going to write x squared minus 10x plus 25 is equal to negative 12. I mean, just remember with equations, what you do on one side, you have to do to the other to balance it. So now we're going to add 25 on the opposite side as well. So now that we had this trinomial, what is the binomial that gets us this answer? And remember, it's whatever half of b was. It was 5. So this now turns into the binomial expression x minus 5 squared is equal to negative 12 plus 25, which is 13. Now we're back at this step. And for us to solve for x, we have to get rid of the exponent. So I take the square root, right? And I take the square root of 13. So now this turns into x minus 5 is equal to, and remember, this is not a perfect square or a radical we could break down. So it's going to stay the same. So we have plus or minus radical 13. Now for us to solve, we just got to get x by itself. So x is equal to positive 5 plus or minus radical 13, and this would be our answer. Now we're going to go over to two more examples where they're going to switch up the methods that we're going to have to use when completing the square. This problem, guys, is probably going to be the most important one for this video because this is what you're typically going to see with completing the square. So they're going to give us a trinomial, and this C term is not going to be the correct C term for a perfect square trinomial. And I wrote the 3 steps down. So number one, we want to isolate. What do we want to isolate? The variables. Because they're typically not going to give us a perfect square trinomial. We have to figure out what is the perfect square trinomial. So when I bring this 20 over, we're going to have x squared plus 8x is equal to positive 20. Now, after I've isolated the variables, right, we want to factor. So this is when we're going to do the half of b squared. So half of 8 gives me 4. 4 squared is 16. So I know this is good. This would be x squared plus 8x plus 16 is equal to 20. We know whatever we add or subtract on this left side, we have to do on the other side. So plus 16. Now, as we clean this up, what is the binomial that would give me this? Half of b. 8 divided by 2 is 4, so we know x plus 4 to the second power squared is going to give us this trinomial, and it's equal to 20 plus 16, which is 36. Now that we've isolated the variables, we've factored the perfect square trinomial and gotten the binomial expression, now we could solve. And for us to solve, the first thing we need to do is get rid of our exponent by taking the square root. So this turns into x plus 4, and this now is equal to 36, the square root of 36, which is just 6. Just don't forget your plus or minus, right? Oops. Because they're going to be two different equations. So now what I have is x plus 4 is equal to positive 6, right? or x plus 4 is equal to negative 6. So my answer would be x is equal to 2 once we subtract 4 on both sides, right? Or x is equal to negative 10 once I subtract 4 from both sides. So this is typically what you're going to see when we talk about completing the square. And these three steps have helped me and a bunch of my students. But before we go, we're going to look at one more problem where the coefficient is larger than 1. Really hope you guys have found this video helpful. This is the whole purpose of it. So in the last part of this video, we have a quadratic that has a coefficient greater than 1. And for us to properly complete the square, the coefficient has to just be 1. But guys, I want you to know that the steps are still the same. They're the same exact steps. So let's go through it. So we're going to isolate the variables, right? So I know I want that one side by itself. So we're going to subtract 6 and move it to the other side. So now I have 3x squared minus 12x is equal to negative 6. Okay, now we need to factor, but we just said that we cannot have a lead coefficient that is greater than 1. So what are we going to do? We're going to divide all of these terms by 3 so that this has a coefficient of 1. So I divide 3 by itself, 12 by 3, and negative 6 by 3. So now we have x squared minus 4x, and this is equal to negative 2, right? And at this step, hold on real quick, let's just double check. All right, this step, there's something that I really want to make sure I touch on. So anytime we're doing half of b, students sometimes make a mistake and want to go back. Let's switch colors. They want to go back to the original equation, but that is not correct. We're focusing on this b, right? So when we complete the square and we come up with that binomial, it's based off x squared minus 4. So we know here half of 4 is 2, right? Half of negative 4 is negative 2. Once we square that, we're going to get this. So we'll have x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to negative 2. This is the perfect square trinomial, and the binomial that gets us there is x minus 2 squared, and that is equal to negative 2 plus 4, right? Added that 4 here, got to make sure to do it on the other side. So as we clean this up, let's go right here. We have x minus 2 squared is now equal to positive 2. So we've isolated, we've now factored, right? We got our factor. Now we just need to make sure we solve. And to solve, we're going to do the same exact steps. Take the square root of x minus 2 squared, do the same thing on the other side. So we have x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus radical 2. Can't break this down any further, right? There's no perfect square for 2. And our final answer will be x is equal to, add 2 on both sides, positive 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. So we really hope this video was helpful, especially our 3 steps to help organize and help you guys solve. Thank you so much for joining us today on our completing the square video. Smash the like button for us, subscribe to the channel, leave comments for future videos you'd like to see on our channel, or if you have questions on today's video. Thank you guys so much for joining Algebra 1 with Mr. Peters.